it should. Thank you very much, Jen. Now I need to get you all back on the screen, which now I do, which is brilliant. How could I not see your beautiful faces? Because then I can't see your reactions, and that is super important. So today we will do some PowerPoint stuff, and we'll make sure that the slides are available to you, so then you can have them. And it means also that you get an opportunity to be fully present in this session, because I don't know about you, but when I'm trying to listen and do a bunch of different things, my brain gets a little distracted. So I'm hoping that you can be fully present and participative today. All right, so lead like a coach. What is it? For me, it's part of deliberate leadership. And Samantha, as we were coming on in, flashed up the book, shameless plug, as if you weren't going to get a flash of the book. I wrote this book last year. It's You Are How You Lead. And the book covers pretty much everything that we're going to go through today. But a central theme in the book is deliberate leadership, because I believe that leaders that are more deliberate have a lot more fun leading. I have a question for you. There's going to be lots of questions for you today. I'm not sure if you're expecting that, but here we go. Can I just have a show of hands, or you feel free to pop it in the chat? Did you choose leadership? Just a reaction or a yes or a no. Did you choose leadership? Hands up, or a reaction or a comment. Did you choose it? All right, we've got some. Got some. My next question for you is, did leadership choose you? Who feels that leadership chose them? Yeah. Am I seeing a few more hands up? Yeah, I think so. So if leadership chose you, which is what happens to most of us, by the way, we're very good technical experts. So someone very early on in our career has seen something in us and has said, you know what, you're brilliant. And to reward you for your brilliance, I'm going to give you a team. And you go, yes, at the start. Let's hope you still feel that sentiment going in and staying in leadership. We get very excited and we go, fantastic. This is my opportunity for a promotion. I get to lead a team. I get to impact and have more of a say, if you like, on how things happen. And generally we do. That is exactly what happens. But when we progress into leadership in that way, we don't always get those fundamentals of what deliberate leadership looks like and what leadership looks like, actually. So I speak to plenty of leaders, and this might be your experience too, where we jump into leadership not really having a full view of what we're getting into. Would you agree? Yeah, I'm getting a few nods, right? And then you're like, oh, this was a good idea at the start. And then you get challenged with a few complex issues. Maybe you move up a few levels. Maybe you're moving through from that operational to middle level management all the way through to executive level leadership, even at board level. The challenges become more complex, becomes more rewarding too, as some of you I'm sure will agree, but it does come with complexity. And so deliberate leadership, if we can really hold on to that mindset of deliberate leadership, it's making the decision to lead every day. It's like being in a relationship. And it's like being in that relationship and going, you know what, I love you sometimes and sometimes you annoy me, but I'm making that decision to be committed to you. So I am making that decision to be in leadership. And that's effectively what deliberate leadership is all about. Now, coincidentally, leaders who coach are deliberate leaders. And that's the link. And I really want to speak to you a little bit more about today. But there is that connection there. So if you've turned up, what is deliberate leadership all about? Well, coaching and that style of coaching is one of our modes in deliberate leadership. But let's move on into what we're going to cover today. So we're going to look at, what does coaching and leadership look like? What does it entail? Let's demystify some of that, maybe build on what you already know. We're going to be looking for the case of coaching and leadership. So there's a couple of research pieces that I want to point you to. I know we've got a large academic audience here, so welcome. I want to take you through the model, the 4-part model of leading like a coach. What does it include? And then I want to leave some time for Q&A. So ask me anything, and hopefully we'll have a good 10, 15 minutes at the end. Does that sound okay for everybody? Brilliant. Let's rock on. Okay. Leader as manager. So we see a lot about, leaders and managers, and I know we usually set these up as a dichotomy a lot of the time, actually, in the literature. And I think that literature still holds true. I think there is qualities and capabilities that belong in the school of management, and then there are certain qualities and capabilities that belong in the school of leadership. I think, though, there is also a distinction between leaders who coach and leaders who manage. And in that column that you've got there as leaders as manager, I would like you to think about that interchangeably, leader or manager, whatever language fits for you in terms of your definition. I'm not going to read that out to you, and it's not an exhaustive list. There's probably about half of the points that are in there and that are in the book. But it's to point out the fact that when we coach, there's a bigger picture strategy that we're focused on. I find that managers and those that lead through that management style tend to be short term and maybe medium term in their focus, but certainly not long term. There's missed opportunities for connection and engagement when we're leading through that lens of management or leadership versus leading through coaching. Now, coaching hasn't moved, Rebecca. Is it moving for everybody else, or are we still on the same slide? We're still on the same slide. Okay. Let me reshare. Thank you very much for letting me know that. So screen sharing is paused. I'm going to stop the share and start it again. So when we are, well, you won't see any of that, so I'm going to have to take you through it. When we are leading, there we go. Where are we now? Are we on a grey slide? Yeah, perfect. All right. And I'm just going to try. Did it move? Yep, for Tasha. Yep. So you're going to pinky salmony kind of slide. Brilliant. Okay. This is what I was talking about. So everything that I've just said for 30 seconds, just put your brain on fast forward for 30 seconds. We're here. You'll get a copy of the recording. So anything that you missed, which you didn't because I was talking, it should be fine. But you can see there with those two lists, we have set them up as comparisons. And the point there is that there is a difference. And leaders, if we've come through the school of I've inherited a team, I've been promoted, I'm learning on the job, which most of us are. I've got a P plater now in my house and I've got an L plater. So they're learning to drive. And my kids, when they get out on the road, the two older ones, the 9-year-old doesn't yet, but it'll come. Those P platers and L platers, when they get out on the road, they're signaling very, very clearly to the other drivers on the road that they are not quite there yet, particularly your L platers. So we're a bit nicer on the road. I remember when my son was an L plater and he was like, oh, drivers are lovely, which is not always my experience. I don't know about you, but there's like almost a bit of an incivility thing that's happening on the roads. I don't know if that's just where I am. But I remember saying to Matthew, people are not going to always be like that. In fact, they're probably going to be more accommodating because you do have that L plate on the back of the car. As leaders, we don't have that privilege, unfortunately, or we don't have that opportunity, if you like, to say, hey, I'm on my L plates, I'm just learning. I'm stepping up, I'm new into leadership, or I'm new into even the executive level leadership. Imagine if they could give us an L plate when we jump into executive level leadership. I know I would have benefited from that because there would have been a period of grace before you jump into that middle manager and then into executive level leadership. So there is a difference. Now, with coaching and all those things that you see there on the right-hand side, I'm going to be covering a lot of that off today because a lot of that is included in those modes of leadership when we do really seek to coach. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them as we go on in. Otherwise, I'll keep moving the slides. Can you see the next slide? Excellent. Okay. So Milner and Milner went and did a study in 2018 and they went, what's all this coaching and leadership thing about? And let's actually measure the effectiveness of that coaching. And they went and tested leaders before their training. And then they did a little training session, which was about 15 hours. And they showed that there was a substantial increase, 40.2%, which I know we've got some, people that are well into the statistics and better than I am. And Richard, I'm looking at you, right, in terms of the statistics and whether that's something important or not. I reckon it is. It's a big number. But it shows that there is, that they had an increased belief in their capability around coaching. So we're not necessarily going to, by osmosis, pick up coaching and leadership. Because again, if we think about that promotional path into leadership, you walk into leadership, maybe you've had a good leader. I hope you have, because we learn heaps from those great leaders. Let's not discount the bad leaders. We learn heaps from them too. Believe it or not, we learn everything hopefully not to do rather than to do. So you need to be discerning in terms of which one you adopt. But even after 15 hours, these leaders had a significantly increased confidence in their ability to coach. And this particular study looked at 9 different coaching skills. But I reckon that's pretty significant. So I really like that. And if you want to do a little bit more digging, that article is available on the Harvard Business Review, and I've popped that little link in there. You can search it. Other things that Milner and Milner found, and these are those 9 coaching skills that they talked about in their research. So listening, top one, I mean, it's the first one. I don't know if they've put this in priority order, but I'm just going to be, a bit free and say, yes, that's probably the number one thing. That's no surprise, don't you think? Would you agree? Listening's got to be the number one thing. And then questioning, we're going to focus a lot today actually on questions, and I'm going to give you a list of some questions that you can ask, and particularly in coaching. So if I was to think about coaches that are really skilled as leaders and leaders who coach, they listen intently. They ask really good questions. I'm going to share some of those with you. They give feedback, and we all go, yeah, feedback's yes, absolutely. We give feedback. But then when we dig a little deeper and we think about the quality of that feedback, we think about the frequency of the feedback, we then start to think about, do we have a feedback culture in our organization? Or does the lone person who's going out giving that feedback feel like they're a bit foreign because no one else is doing it? So feedback is complex, and we're really looking at operating in an environment where feedback is encouraged and it's nurtured and it becomes part of the way that we do things. Key leaders who coach assist with goal setting. So can you imagine if do we have any AFL fans? This is going to be a decisive question, I know, because it's not just Victorians that we have on the call. AFL or rugby league or your sport of choice. I mean, gosh, we've had the Olympics on. Any of those coaches, right, that are even breakdancing. Great gun. How awesome is she? I'd love to speak to her coach. Is she in any of your institutions, by the way? If we've got university people, I know she is part of one of them. Queensland, I think. Queenslander? I don't know, Fiona, I was looking at you. Maybe I thought maybe Queensland. But anyway, even Ray Gunn, our breakdancer, who's gone viral, imagine going viral for breakdancing, she will have a coach, and that coach is going to assist her with that goal setting and really being able to break down what that person needs to do. Now, I reckon leaders here get stuck because leaders go, well, I don't want to micromanage. Like, my team's pretty good. I'm just going to go into delegation mode. And that's great if you've got someone who is quite capable and someone who is quite resourceful and can jump straight on in. But if we don't, we might find that we need to just spend a little bit of time not jumping into micromanaging, but actually helping and really pacing that goal setting with the overarching view of helping that person's development. That's what we're doing when we're coaching. Empathy, which I'll talk about in a moment, but that has to come in abundance when we're leading like a coach, letting the coachee arrive at their own solution. If I was to think out of these 9 things, what's the thing in my experience that leaders have most trouble with? It's this one. I'm getting some nods. Hey, Danielle, would you mind? You're not going to nod again after this. No one's going to nod. Actually, they're going to sit there. Or you were nodding. Would you mind just unmuting and letting us know why you're nodding?
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. I've got you on 3 different screens so I don't get tempted to do work while I'm on the
Well
Zoom
done. Good
call.
strategy. Everyone do what Danielle's doing.
Yeah, I've just had many interactions with leadership where they are quick to just give you a solution instead of developing your skills on how do you find that solution. And I find it frustrating because I want to know why and how that works. So I guess also learning to let go of that control in that management position or that leadership role of saying, well, this is how I found that thing, instead of just giving an answer. Like, I am not in a leadership role currently, but if people do come to me for leadership, it's hard not to just say, here's the answer. So I guess that's why I was nodding from both angles of being the one to just receive an answer instead of receiving the tools to find that answer, and also just being the one who's like, I'm time poor, I just need to give you this answer so that you can go and do the thing. So yeah, that's
brilliant. Brilliant, Danielle. Danielle, thank you for being so gracious and allowing me to put you on the spot like that. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And all those things I'm absolutely emphatically nodding to, because when I get a lot of leaders, and Danielle's pointed this out, I get a lot of leaders say, hey, I want my team to be resourceful. They're not showing enough initiative. But then you're getting asked a question as a leader, and your initial reaction is to respond, because you're thinking, isn't that what I'm paid to do? I'm paid to solve problems, which means I'm paid to answer questions when I get those questions. Maybe hold that thought when we get into questions in about 10 minutes. The other thing, though, that then leaders tell me is I'm exhausted. Gee, my team, every leader, have you got 5 minutes? Fiona, have you got 5 minutes? And we get this constant, have you got 5 minutes? Have you got 5 minutes? Because we keep feeding this need for them to ask a question and for us to answer that question. So we're actually setting up a pattern here. Now, by all means, I'm not saying don't answer questions, because you might not be very popular. But we need to also let people arrive at their own solutions, and we need to give them almost a bit of a playground, if I can use that term, in terms of having a play. Let's go and find it out. Let's go and work together. Who can you go and have a chat to that might help you out with that? Because if we're constantly setting up this dynamic of I'm here to answer your questions because I'm the leader, the questions will keep coming, and they'll keep coming thick and fast. And you'll love it for a period of time, and then you'll go, this is damn annoying because I can't get on and do what I need to do. I'm not saying your team's annoying, by the way. It's the questions that are coming. And they're the repeat questions, and you're like, oh, didn't we have this conversation a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 months ago? Your expectation is going to be, well, I've told you the answer once. Surely you'll go off and do what you need to do. But people won't always get that because it's easy to ask a question. So easy to ask a question. So that's that number 6 there, I think, is the from my experience where leaders get stuck, because it's adjusting the value you think you're there to contribute as a leader, and it's not always going to be about asking or answering those questions. 7, 8, and 9, I reckon, are pretty self-explanatory. So recognizing and pointing out strengths, structure, so vision, purpose, why we're doing the thing. What is the thing that we're doing? Where does that fit into the context of strategy? And then encouraging a solution-focused approach. And that's a personal favorite because it's practical, and I like practical stuff. Is there anything there that you would add, that you're busting to add, that's not there? Oh, it was Macquarie. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, teach a person to fish. Absolutely, Mike. Anything else that you would add? Or do you reckon Milner and nailed it? I reckon they've got all bases covered.
Rita, I don't have an ad, but I do have a problem with number 5 in that I tend to be a little bit too empathetic as a leader. And then I have found myself in situations where I am then taken advantage of, and I'm doing stuff for people that they should be doing because I'm overly empathetic to what they've got going on, whether it's professionally or personally and things. So I'd be really keen to get your thoughts on how to strike a balance there, because I tend to be too much in that regard.
Yeah. The quick answer to that, Jordana, is, well, there's no quick answer. I'd be doing it a disservice, but it is about having an awareness. So you've always got to lift out and go, well, what's the dynamic here at play? Is the person prepared to put in the work? What's my role as the leader in coaching and guiding them versus doing it for them? The question I commonly, well, not so much a question, but there's a tension between managing performance. And I don't mean the punitive type. I mean just managing everyday performance, making sure goals and KPIs are met, and then also balancing that with any hardship, adversity, challenge that's going on for the person. And I find that a lot of leaders struggle with that because they go, oh, I'm aware, so I'm going to take the pedal off the performance, which is not always, I won't say never. I'm not saying never do that, but it's not always the best thing to do for that person. And when we talk about support, which is a final component of the model, I'm going to give you some tips around what support can look like. And support often feels like, well, I'll take the burden away from you and I'll remove the heaviness of what you're dealing with. But often it's not supportive in terms of leadership, and particularly in coaching. So in coaching, in that situation, we want to make sure that we're understanding the boundaries. We're being aware. So what are the dynamics at play here? What are the boundaries? What am I responsible for? What's that person responsible for? And sometimes the kindest thing we can do is ensure that we are maintaining those boundaries. Because once they start to bleed and we start to take the foot off performance, maybe, take on responsibility for things that's not really within our, frame of responsibility, we're not always doing the right thing. So I'd have that mantra of, well, what's the right thing here? Not presupposing what the right thing is for someone, but almost asking them, so what would the right thing, how can I support you? Spoiler alert for 15 minutes away, spoiler alert. How can I best support you? And if you've been in my programs, that's not going to be foreign to you. You will know that I ask that question. And I think that's one of the number one questions that we can ask. Thank you for the question, though. And I hope that that's helped somewhat. But if it hasn't, we'll bring it into the Q&A. So there are coaching skills from Milner and Milner. I reckon that that's a pretty comprehensive list. There might be a few more things that we could add to it, but I think that that's got our bases covered. When we're looking to develop ourselves as leaders, we might start off as reluctant leaders. what am I doing here? I thought this was a good idea. Am I good enough to lead? Am I ready to lead? Am I ready to take on an executive level role? Am I ready to take on a middle manager role? Whatever it may be. There's we can start with a sense of reluctance. And so if you think about these columns, you know, one is our path, and these are feelings that we might feel as we're progressing through our leadership journey. And then I have suggested there's some focus areas that help you through. Those focus areas are all part of leading like a coach. And then we've got our level of engagement. So why do this? Because we want our teams to be more engaged. More engaged teams equal higher performing teams. If any of you have been in my programs, you will know that I make no apology about saying that we want, you know, if you are in a commercial organisation, I'm aware that some of you are not, but even in NGO, non-for-profits, charity, I sit on the board of a charity, I work for a public hospital in a board capacity. I know what it's like to not work in a commercial environment. We still want people to be engaged, and we still want them to be high performing, because that drives better outcomes. And I don't know about you, but that's pretty appealing to me. Doesn't have to have dollar signs on the end of it. It might be our impact, the impact that we can have on our community and those that we serve. It might be working with our clients and whatever they look like, whether they're patients or students or whatever your terminology for your kind of client is. But we want engagement. We want people to want to do stuff with us because we feel good to be around and because we lead well. And so wherever you might be right now on that path, you know, if you could enact that focus area, or maybe, you know, you're thinking about this through the lens of a colleague that you might be thinking about. But these are the things that we want to invoke. It's basically what's in that focus column. And these are all components of leading like a coach, which we'll go into in a moment. This is the model, affectionately termed the bow tie model. Not very original, I know, but it does look like a bow tie. And what I want you to think about with this model is almost like a flywheel. So we've got self-awareness and trust that just continue to spin, either clockwise or anti-clockwise, whatever works for you. But we need self-awareness and trust basically to propel this model. We don't have effective coaches and leaders that coach unless you have self-awareness, and that's you as the leader, and you've got trust within your team. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. But they're the two things that sit central to this model. They propel our flywheel. And then the other thing that we've got to the side of these, and these are our inputs and our outputs, if you like. We've got connect and ask. And now we're going to the four areas, if you like, of our model. The connect and ask are the first two, and then we've got calibrate and support. So self-awareness and trust, they're happening all the time. In fact, well, connect, ask, calibrate, and support are also happening all the time, but it's a bit easier to spot when we need to shift through these modes. So think about connect, ask, calibrate, support as modes that you move into. So you're not always going to be in one or the other. You may be in all four in one conversation, by the way. So if you're familiar with Ken Blanchard's situational leadership model, this kind of has the same look, feel, and smell to it. Because in that model, we move through those modes. And in fact, if we get stuck with one or in one, I say, well, that's danger zone, because that's like me trying to drive my car in first gear all the time. I'm not going to get very far. I need to be able to change gears by listening to the sound of my engine. Your engine is your team. In this context, it's your team, and it's you working out, do I need to connect? Do I need to be asking more questions? Do I need to be calibrating what I know? Or do I need to be supporting? And as I said, you may need to do those things, all of them, or some of them simultaneously. But self-awareness and trust are moving all the way through. So if we look now at trust, so when I run the Leader as Coach program, we spend quite a bit of time. And in fact, it's 3 or 4 hours. It's almost half day that we spend on trust. One of my favorite quotes on trust is that trust arrives on foot and it leaves on horseback. And it's a beautiful Dutch proverb. As you read that and as you ponder it, just pop in the chat what that meaning is for you. Proverbs are really weird, right? So I went to primary school a long time ago, and I'll often now rattle off some proverb. I don't know where you were educated, but in the school that it happened to be grade 3 or 4, and our teacher at the time, and it must have been for some English unit, but she just taught us all these proverbs. And at the time, I remember thinking, this does not make sense. But don't you reckon that sometimes a proverb is like the best way to say something without actually saying the thing? Because we are all drawing our meaning from it, right? So you might want to put in the chat what this means for you. What this means for me is that I need to work really hard all the time to maintain trust, because in an instant, and literally in an instant, it can be gone. Exactly right, Jordana. It could be in the way that I look at someone. It could be in the way that I avoid eye contact actually with someone. It might be the fact that I take too long to respond to something, or I'm not considered enough when I respond to something. And, you know, with those 4 examples I've just given you, I haven't even opened my mouth, right? These are all actions that are just occurring without me even having necessarily said something to someone. But trust can be lost in an instant. So we have to consistently be thinking about, how do I maintain that trust? And when we coach, to coach someone is a privilege. It is an absolute privilege, because they are being very open with you, very vulnerable with you. They're letting you in. And when you are leading as a coach, you've almost got the relationship. There's a double focus on it. So you're leading them and you're coaching them. And you need trust to be able to do that, because they'll open up to you about stuff that might be getting in the way of performance, might be a tricky conversation that you need to have with them or they need to have with you. It might be about collaboration, psych safety, conflict, whatever it might be. They're going to open up to you. So we need a good level of trust to be able to even start those conversations, let alone continue them, right? So trust is a huge part of leading like a coach, and in fact, leadership overall. And I could give you a lot more on it, but we're not here just on trust today. But that's a little taster. In terms of self-awareness, what you see on the screen right now is the model, or it's a diagnostic that I use called the Clarity 4D. Now, I don't just use the Clarity 4D, I use other diagnostics too, but I find that this one, and some of you have completed this with me, I find that this one is one of the best ones to really get people tuned in from a self-awareness perspective, because it focuses on working styles and communication. And so when we understand where we might sit in this quite simple model, but then we also consider where others sit, what's their learning style, you know, how are they approaching things, all of a sudden, rather than being judgmental, and I'm going to speak for myself here, not for anybody else, of course, rather than me being judgmental, I switch on curiosity. And I go, oh, maybe they're not such a so-and-so after all. Like maybe I could actually work with them. And now I understand actually why they irritate me. They don't irritate me because of who they are personally. They irritate me because we're coming at something from a different color energy. I might be more assertive and direct and focused. It's all true, by the way, I am. And I might be working with someone that's really high green. And I've got a pretty high dose of green, but not as high as my red. And sometimes that can cause friction and frustration. So in order to build self-awareness, I've got to understand what my preferences are, where I come from, but then also give regard to those that I'm working with, whether they be my peers, whether they be my direct managers, my line managers, my direct reports, diagonal, across, horizontal, sideways, like all of it, right? Everybody that's within my sphere of influence, my stakeholders. And so we spend quite a lot of time going through, well, who am I? How do I show up? How do I like to work? How do I like to communicate? But then also, you know, it's not just the view according to me. I've got to give regard to others in my world and those that are in my sphere of influence. So from a self-awareness perspective, we play with this tool. We play with some other ones. We'll also do things like strengths-based assessments, maybe using Gallup, or maybe using the VIA Strengths or the viacharacter.org. That's one, if you haven't seen it, recommend you go in because it's free. Always love a freebie, right? But the viacharacter.org. So if you just go in, don't do it now, of course, because remember, Danielle's got us on 3 screens, so we're fully present and focused today. But after today, I'll actually pop it in the notes for you. It's a really good way just to get a sense of, what are my strengths? And you may know what they are. In fact, I'd be very surprised if you didn't. But it's good just to have some time to think and reflect about, what are my strengths? What do I lead with? That's going to work for some people. It won't necessarily work for everybody. So far we've looked at those central components of our flywheel, trust and self-awareness, and we focus a lot on that, and we continue to do so. All right, now let's move into the guts of it, right? So now I'm moving into those 4 elements. So you remember our bow tie had connect, ask, and then calibrate, support. We had trust and self-awareness flying around. There are a few things where we can help us, but also help our teams in terms of connection. So connect is a really important part. We need to connect all the time, right? So I've got empathy mapping up there. Some of you will have done empathy mapping with me. It's a method that we use. Jordana, so based on your question before, where we go, oh, maybe I'm being too empathetic. I don't know, maybe there is no such thing as being too empathetic, but I think that we can be strategic with how empathetic we are. And that makes it sound cold and heartless, and I promise you that's not the intention at all. But I think sometimes to understand a person's perspective and where they're coming from in a formulaic kind of, well, it's not really formulaic, it's you actually subjectively thinking about what is the person thinking, seeing, doing, and feeling in relation to the issue that we're dealing with. So I teach people a process using the empathy map. So that's one way to build connection. It's a good way. And you can do that with anybody. Again, people that sit above you, below you, to the side of you. It's not just for your direct reports. And then the other thing that I wanted to offer you today, this is really simple, right? But it's one-on-ones. You'd be surprised at how many times I turn up in like working with a group of leaders, and I'll say, so how are things going? Are you connecting with your teams? And they'll go, oh no, we meet once a month. Please, nobody on this call telling me that you're only meeting with someone in appraisal time. Everyone's like, oh, I'm not going to say no. It's not to name and shame you. We need to regularly meet with people and connect. This is a way to connect with them, and it's a really simple way to do it. And there's a piece of research, would you believe? There's more than one piece of research. So what a commonly asked question I get is, how often? What should a one-on-one look like? What should a one-on-one include? And I can give you templates till the cows come home around one-on-ones, and you'll no doubt have your own, because you're all seasoned leaders. But there is some really interesting research, it's only a couple of years old now, around how often. And the golden rule, and these are options in preference order from the research, not my preferences, but it's once a week for 30 minutes. And the key to that once a week for 30 minutes, because you're probably going, oh, how would I cover everything we need to cover when we're meeting for an hour and a half every month or whatever it is that you're doing? Hit the high notes is what I like to say here. Don't use your one-on-one time to go through work in progress. Bloody boring. It's like boring, like when I started talking to you about the weather at the start of this conversation. Don't do it. Right. Now, it's not to say that work in progress is not important. Of course it is. But we've got so many ways now to capture progress, don't you think? Like I can chuck with our team, Jen's on, we've got all the stuff in a star. So at any moment, each of us can go in and go, well, who's doing what, by when, how are we doing it? We collaborate through that tool. Right. So we've got our, and you'll have your programs, and feel free to tuck them into the chat around what you use. But your work in progress stuff, anything that you can put forward and you can share, which is not going to take precious face-to-face time, don't include it in your one-on-ones. So work in progress stuff out. Yes. Well, Roger said that the second best option, if you can't afford to do weekly for 30 minutes, then fortnightly is okay, but obviously you've got to extend the time. Fortnightly is okay. And I get a lot of leaders saying to me, I've got 8, 10 direct reports. If I'm spending 30 minutes with them, that's a whole day or a day and a half taken out of my time. And I get it. I get it. So even shorter, and that's what Rebecca's referring to there, the 15, 30 minutes, almost, I won't say huddle style, but going into that short, sharp, what do you need might work for you too. And then that third option is hybrid, and that's really good where you've got a team, obviously, that is hybrid, or where you can't, meet with people, mix it up. You might do weekly with some, fortnightly with others. I would be cautious around that. So I've got a client I'm working with at the moment in a coaching capacity, and her leader meets with her very infrequently from a one-on-one perspective because they share an office. Big office. So everyone's in their own corner, but they share an office. But with the rest of the direct reports, this person meets weekly. Like you can imagine how that would feel, yeah? Like you're getting that sense of, oh, what about me? What about me? Everyone else is getting this one-on-one time. And because of the fact that we're in the same office, we coexist, or, we're co-located, then we don't need a one-on-one. And that's absolutely not contributing to connection for these two. So it's causing friction. It's causing quite a bit of tension. So the quality of the conversation has to trump how often you're seeing that person. And that's why I'm suggesting get rid of your work in progress stuff and actually make it a very focused conversation about that individual. What's on your mind? What's getting in your way? What's going to be the most powerful thing for you to move this thing forward? Like really kind of deep questions. And for 30 minutes, you might have one or two really big questions that will promote some really good conversation. That is connection. That is connection. Catching up on the transactional stuff, in my view, is not. It's transactional. So that is a piece of research, but of course, that is just food for thought with whatever you're doing. Yeah, lovely, Mike. All right, so let's move now. I'm not really a maths person, but I don't mind a ratio. So we're going to ask now, just to give you a little heads up. So we've done connect, and now we go to ask. What do you reckon that means? What is she banging on about today, given that I'm talking about ask and asking questions? What do you reckon I mean by that 2-to-1 ratio? Come on, someone have a go. Mike?
Hi, team member versus the manager or the leader talking.
Yes, that too. We could absolutely use it for that. Carolyn's onto something there. Ask questions. Carolyn, would you mind unmuting? Hello and welcome, and it's good to see you. Tell us a little bit more.
Hey, Rita.
Hello.
Yeah, firstly, I started going to positive feedback versus negative feedback, but I think that might be I thought, no, 2-to-1, that I'm asking questions versus giving answer if we're playing in a coaching context.
Yeah, spot on. So I like where you were going though, Mike. I like where you were going too. So the most recent feedback literature tells us that we need to, so forget your feedback sandwich method that we were all taught way back when, good, bad, good. It's just in general, from a feedback perspective, we are encouraged to just usually give 2 positive comments to every critical comment or constructive comment. In this context though, and because it is about asking, it is questions asked versus questions answered. Now, I don't know some of you very well, and I've only known you for 40 minutes on this call, but I'm going to pose a challenge to you if you are so brave as to accept it. And that is, could you go a day with asking double the amount of questions that you answer? Sally's like, I don't know, Sally. I saw that, Sally. It was almost audible. And
yeah, no, it's totally. I do need to do that. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, we all have to do it, right? We all have to do it. Could we ask more questions than we answer? It is a challenge for us, but one that if you are willing to accept it, it really stops what we were talking about at the start of this conversation when I asked poor Danielle to unmute because she was nodding emphatically. What it does is it stops that. Because when you come, like if my son said to me this morning, Mum, can you pack my bag? I was rushing around, he's rushing around. And I said, no, you've got 10 minutes, you can do it, right? Because on the odd occasion I've packed the bag, he's 9. If I continue to do that, guess who's going to be lumped with packing the bag every day? Because he's like, this is awesome. I can go and play with Lego or do whatever he wants to do in the morning rather than pack my bag. If you can ask more questions than you answer, you are setting up a different dynamic with your team. You're empowering them. You're also giving them a vote of confidence around, what do you reckon? Yeah, I reckon you're onto something there. Let's go and explore it. Let's see how it works. What's the worst that could happen? And I never support reckless behavior. So I'm not talking about being reckless. I'm talking about having a go and taking risks and having a play where you can, right? So we want to ask questions with a 2-to-1 ratio. You're happy to accept that personal challenge? Yeah. As if you'd say no in front of everybody. No, we don't do that. Now, 2-to-1. So remember, that's our challenge. And now, how could I ask you to accept that challenge without giving you some questions? That would just be rude, wouldn't it? So here are some questions. Now, these ones here are inspired by Michael Bungay Stanier's work. And he wrote a fabulous book called The Coaching Habits, and I would highly recommend it. Michael has dedicated his thought leadership to the area of really good questions. And he's got 7 in his book. So some of these are inspired by Michael's work. And there's a few more in there. And I said to you earlier on, I said, spoiler alert, my favorite question ever, hands down, is how can I best support you? Why do you reckon that's my favorite questions? Good on you, Mike. We can ask a lot of questions as parents. Why do you reckon that first one is my favorite question? And if you've been in a program with me and you want to cheat, go for it. It's not cheating. You're just regurgitating what you've learnt, hopefully, and what's stuck. Why do you reckon that's my number one question? I had a leader a little while ago. Oh, Sally, go for it. So I'm just going to close my door because we're about to get some noise. Sally, go for it.
Okay, I was just going to say, I feel like because you're offering support, but you're also giving them the opportunity to come up with a solution.
Yes, exactly right. It's empowering, isn't it?
Mm.
So when someone is going through some heavy stuff and we say, oh, good, I got you, I could come in and rescue you, we're not always doing the right thing by them. And this is what I was, kind of going to before when Jordana asked her question about empathy. When we, in fact, say, gee, that must be tough. In fact, I can't even begin to imagine how tough that might be for you. How can I best support you? The responsibility for the thing that needs to come next sits with them, not with you. Because it's not your responsibility, even though you're the leader. It's their responsibility. It is their responsibility to work out, what do I need next? Now, in some situations, that's going to be really hard to navigate, depending on what the circumstance is. But for most situations, with some time, with empathy, compassion, and support, the person can get there around what they need. And they might not give you an answer to that one straight away, and that's okay. But I don't always lead with that question, but it's my favorite one around ask, this mode of ask. So you've got them there, and I could spend forever in a day just on questions. In fact, we're about to publish a downloadable that we're working on with 50. So we've got 55 best questions, and we're going to make that available on our Deliberate Leader platform, which you'll all get access to, which will give you even more questions that you can ask, particularly through this coaching lens. All right, now I want to go to calibrate. So calibrate's our third part of the model. And in calibrate, so we borrow this tool. I've borrowed the term from neuro-linguistic programming, where that calibration is thinking about all the different data points that I've got as a leader and then working out what my next step is based on all the different data points. Because if I just go based on one data point, such as, well, the person keeps turning up late, but I don't give regard to anything else that's going on for them, I might be missing something, but also unfairly having an expectation of them that they can't meet right now. So in calibration, I am thinking about my connection with them, which is in that first bubble. So I'm connecting, I'm reconnecting with them. Maybe sometimes I'm showing genuine interest in their world. What's going on? What's the big stuff for you? Girlfriend of mine, and I've only been thinking about this recently, long-term, known each other for over 20 years. But when we have a conversation, she'll start with, hey, Rita. She'll go, what do you know? And that's how she'll start her conversation. And it's not because she necessarily wants to know what I know, but it's the what do you know is almost like, what's on your mind? Like, what do you know? What's right here? Prefrontal cortex stuff. And it kind of hits you and you go, oh, so you can borrow her question. I'm sure she won't mind. Her name is Michelle. In fact, she'll love it. She'll love that I've shared that with all of you today. But what do you know? Or you might find your other question in terms of reconnecting with the person and really showing genuine interest in what's going on. So we connect and then we calibrate. Because have you ever had that situation where you go to someone, how are you? And they go, yeah, good. And you're like, you're not good. You are so far from good. Right? And you know it. And they're wearing it. They're not good. Their body language is kind of, downtrodden. They're just not feeling it. So that is a moment where, as a leader, we calibrate that information. We go, well, my experience of that person, what I'm observing and what they've said either makes sense or it doesn't. So in calibration, we are sense making. We're going, well, does this fit with the picture that I'm being told here? Then we're asking questions. So we're asking questions, we're exploring issues, we're maintaining that connection. What do you know? If you want to use Michelle's question, we're leveraging trust, we're showing empathy. we're doing all those things, and then again, we're calibrating that. Is what we are hearing and experiencing of this person matching with how they are showing up? If not, what can we do? How can I best support you? What might be getting in the way, etc. And then we're going into support, which is what I want to focus on now. But in calibration, effectively, we're really focusing on what we're observing, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, our experience of that person, and does that match? And where our brain goes, alert, 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 no match, then we can go in and work out what we need to do, whether we need to ask more questions, whether we need to show more empathy, more support, more understanding, whatever it is. But that calibration is super important. It slows us down as leaders, and sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need to slow down to make sure that we're getting that full picture. And then finally, in support, and again, I think I did a little spoiler alert on this one earlier too. Sometimes what we think is supportive is not always going to be received as supportive by the other person. Have you ever had an example of something that someone has said where you go, I can't believe you just said that, and they were intending to be supportive? Has anyone ever had that happen? My mum, God bless her, does it all the time. She intends to be supportive, and she comes out with these one-liners, and I go, Mum, that is so not supportive. Her intention's good. Her intention is great. I reckon I've done it with my team over the years. Tash, you're not allowed to nod, right? Tash is not allowed to nod. Tash was in my team a long time ago. She's flying now. But in that time that we worked together, I'm sure, in fact, Jen, you're not allowed to say anything either. Jen, no, I'm joking. I'm sure at times I attempt to be supportive, but I'm really not. Because maybe I'm working to my time frames. Maybe I am trying to, maybe I'm trying to remove pain for someone. And I'm like, you'll be right. Put this into perspective. It's not as bad as what you think. That's really salvageable. And because I'm such a blind optimist, on the Harrison assessment, I come out as blind optimist. So my intention can absolutely be, no, it'll be fine. We'll get through. And that's not always supportive. Whereas when we're leading with, how can I support you? What can I do? I'm not presupposing what that person needs. Can you see that on that right-hand side? I'm just creating space. Just creating space for that person. And that's often the basis of support. It's about creating that space and letting them know that you're there. All right. The lead like a coach. If you want to double down on anything else that you've heard today, of course you can call me. You're always more than welcome to do that. That is the book. You can order it off the website. But in the book, there's a whole chapter that goes through that model that you see on the right-hand side. And these are all the characteristics and the capabilities of a deliberate leader. And the book goes through almost like a competency model. So it says, if you want to develop a bit more empathy, do more of this, do less of this. It also tells you what being empathetic is. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to that. And what I wanted to do today was offer you the opportunity to do one of the self-assessments. It's a diagnostic. So that QR code that you see on the screen right now will take you to a diagnostic. And that diagnostic, it's a deliberate leader diagnostic, will give you your own personalized result around those characteristics of deliberate leadership. We've then got a workbook that you can use that accompanies it. But I want to be able to give you as much information as possible around leading like a coach, because it's less science and more art, I guess. It's really around our connection with individuals, our ability to ask really great questions, our ability to calibrate the information that we're hearing and seeing and observing, and our ability to support them. And all the while, we're maintaining trust and we're maintaining self-awareness at the heart of that. I have done enough talking, and I'm hoping that enough of that talking has spurred on some questions. So I want to move now into a few minutes. I've got heaps of time, but some time for Q&A. So would anyone like to unmute or even offer a comment, an insight, or a question today? Carolyn, that you've got this is something that I'll often, I'll kind of joke about in terms of a meme, but it's often we want to do that as a cheerleader. We want to be the cheerleader, but they've got to believe it too, hey? I completely agree. Sally, go for it.
Yes, so just actually following on from what Caroline, saying, I'm really struggling with a team member who has asked for additional responsibility, but she keeps defaulting to the stuff that she was complaining about what she was. So I've restructured her PD to give her some new things, but she won't do it. And I'm like really struggling to try to, how can I support her? Because I've had conversations about it and we've got to some stuff, but I feel like some of that is psychological, some of that is outside of the work domain. But I do really struggle with understanding how to support her because she can't tell me how I can support her. Yeah.
Do you think she genuinely does not know what she needs, or she can't see it right now? What do you think might be some of the contributing factors there?
Well, I think she's really great, and I think she can do it. So, like, I fully believe that she can do it, but I don't think that she believes that she can do it.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, I guess. So,
yeah. So I think with I was having a conversation earlier this morning with someone about confidence and conviction. And I was talking about the fact that confidence is often, we feed from others around confidence. So they might say, oh, gee, good job on that. And we go, oh, awesome, like someone's noticed. Or great color on you. And then you go, oh, that's my color because I've got a couple of compliments about the color I'm wearing. So that's my color, right? So it kind of props us up a little bit, and that gives us the confidence. Whereas conviction comes from a place deep within the individual. And it's really hard to manufacture conviction. It's hard for someone else to manufacture on our behalf because you've got to harvest that yourself. That is self-belief. It's you knowing that you can do something, or if you haven't done it, knowing that you've got the potential and the ability to do it. So maybe I'm just wondering, and I'm going to give you, obviously it's a very quick response to a much more complex, longer question, but I wonder if continuing to not shower with compliments, but almost like, yeah, great, like really recognizing what they're doing to build up that sense of, yes, I can do it, and that sense of conviction. So because you've got, as the leader or as the colleague, we can feed confidence, but we can't build that conviction. The conviction has to be done by the individual. But by building confidence, recognizing, when we saw the 2-to-1 ratio, that is absolutely, 2 pieces of positive feedback to 1 piece of constructive, we can have an impact on that person's conviction. Because obviously they see something in themselves. If they say, hey, I'm ready to take on more responsibilities, they obviously see something, or it might be different factors driving the need for more responsibilities. But there's a start of something there, and it might just be with a bit more. Ken Blanchard's situational leadership model talks about directing, coaching, supporting, and then delegating. And it might just be that this person requires a little bit more on that, directing and coaching, and not so much that delegation. Does that help, Sally?
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you.
All right. Mike.
Thanks, Rita. I guess I struggle a lot with the dichotomy between manager and leader. And so often when I look at the roles that I've been in and other, I suppose, C-suite and execs accepted, there's such a requirement for both sides of that equation. So is it just a matter of jumping between the two? Or I'm not familiar with Ken Blanchard's work just a little, so it sounds like I might need to spend more time reading that.
Yeah. I don't want to say that, we don't want to ever lead like a manager, but I think when we lead like a coach, there's nothing that's taken away from our ability to still lead and manage and, do all those kind of more operational areas of focus in our team, but we can do that through the coaching lens. So I think what coaching does is it complements that ability to drive performance and that, direction and goal setting and strategy and all those things that we typically and traditionally will think about when we think about a good manager and a good leader. In my mind, that manager is a really good operational administrator. So they will keep the lights on, they'll drive performance. Whereas that leader, when we get into that leadership, it's more that inspirational vision setting. I'm going to take you on a path. Do you want to come with me? It's more that. And I think that coaching absolutely complements that because it engenders trust. And when we've got more trust, people are happier, I think. And we saw it from an engagement perspective, they're more engaged, but they're also happy to be connected with us, because we're taking them somewhere. We're not only doing it to grow our own profits or commercial outcomes, but we're actually also doing it to help and support their development. Does that help, Mike?
It does. I suppose I often see where situations where people just need to do what you need them to do.
Yeah.
And there's a season for all things, right? So sometimes we can sit and talk about it. Sometimes we can have the discussion. But other times, I need you to do what I need you to do, and that's quite directional. So is it a matter of structure then, so that the leader has their lieutenants that do the managing? Is that ideally the way?
Probably less about structure. I know where you're going with it, and I think it's fair, because sometimes, we can't always be spending our time having hour and a half discussions on things that just is like, I just need you to do it. Can you go off and do it? People, in my experience, will be more willing to go off and do that thing that you need them to do when they've got the context and when they've got that trust. So that is all part of, in that coaching realm. I guess when we're leading like a coach, we absolutely can. There's still room for, hey, have you got a minute? I just need you to do that. Or you did that. I need you to make these kinds of changes. So it can still be short, sharp, but they're more likely to engage with you when we're doing it through that coaching lens.
Perhaps there's another session on managing like a coach. Sometimes
there could be. Well, we should talk about that more, Mike, if that is something that's coming to mind for you, because I think it's in the language a lot of the time and what we think about with managing and leading. Yeah. I am happy to hang. If it's 1:01 now, so apologies for running over. Thank you so much for coming along today. It was lovely to see you all, and just lovely to spend some time talking about something that I am very, very passionate about, which is coaching and leading like a coach. Reach out. You've got all the details there, and I'd love to chat with you if this is something important to you. Otherwise, just reach out. But thank you, Jardana. Thanks, everyone. I'm happy to hang for a couple of minutes if you've got a question or two, or feel free to just email them across. Good to see you all.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. Bye.
See you, Tash. See you soon.